Open the suitcase. Every item. One by one. The command snapped across the check-in hall, cold and humiliating. It was directed at Angela Morrison, a poised black woman standing calmly with her bag on the scale. The number glowed clear. 49.5 pounds under the limit. Yet instead of sending her forward like everyone else, the agent smirked and began pulling her belongings out in front of a gawking crowd. Shoes dropped onto the counter, a blouse, even a tube of toothpaste. Passengers gasped. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others lifted their phones to capture the indignity. Whispers threaded through the air. They're targeting her. This isn't policy. Angela's face remained composed, but her silence carried weight. Something in her stillness unsettled the room, as though she knew a secret no one else did. Within minutes, the power dynamic in that terminal would flip so violently that the same people mocking her would fall silent in awe. So, where are you listening from tonight? Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe no traveler should ever face humiliation disguised as policy, make sure you subscribe because what happens next will leave you stunned. The check-in hall was alive with noise that morning. Rolling bags clattered across the tile. Voices blended into a steady hum, interrupted by the occasional boarding call drifting from overhead speakers. At counter 17, beneath the bright glow of a fluorescent bar, Angela Morrison stepped forward. She was 45, tall, dressed in a tailored navy blazer that framed her presence without shouting it. In one hand, she held a black leather carry-on. With the other, she lifted her checked suitcase onto the silver platform of the scale. Numbers blinked into life. 49.5 pounds. Angela offered a calm nod. Well within your limit. The agent, Carl Benson, didn't nod back. His mouth flattened. Ma'am, I'll need you to open the bag. It's under 50. Carl's voice was cold, almost rehearsed. Open it. I'll be weighing each item separately. Heads turned. The man in line behind her, Robert Jenkins, whispered to his wife. That's not standard. Never seen that before. Angela steadied her voice. Excuse me. You want me to unpack my personal belongings here? In front of everyone? Carl's expression did not shift. Yes, right now. The belt paused. The hall seemed to still. Angela glanced around. Dozens of travelers had stopped moving. Phones slid from pockets. Red record buttons glowed. Angela unzipped the case slowly, her hands deliberate. She was not shaking, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed a storm held in check. Carl reached in without asking permission. He lifted out a pair of heels, set them on the scale, muttered the number. Next, a folded blouse, then a sealed tube of toothpaste. Piece by piece, her life was displayed beneath the fluorescent glare. Whispers thickened around them. Why is he doing that? A young mother murmured, clutching her stroller handle. Never seen anyone else treated that way, said an older man in a red baseball cap. A woman across the rope barrier, Denise Palmer, raised her phone high. This ain't right. Y'all see what's happening? This ain't policy. This is humiliation. Carl ignored the murmurs. He reached deeper into the suitcase. His hand brushed against something stiff, wedged at the bottom. He pulled it free. A black leather folder. The airline's embossed logo caught the fluorescent light and threw it back in silver glint. Carl hesitated, unsure if he should open it. But Angela's voice broke the silence first. Careful, she said evenly. That belongs to me. By now, the crowd was leaning in. Screens tilted. The sense of spectacle thickened. A college student whispered, "This is gonna go viral." Angela stepped forward, reclaiming the folder with a slow, steady hand. She laid it flat on the counter, flipped the cover open. The first page glared in bold red type, Strategic Oversight Authority, Clause 12.4. Carl's jaw worked, but no sound emerged. Behind him, his supervisor, Marilyn Scott, stiffened. She had been watching from a few feet away, arms crossed, and her color drained as she saw the page. Angela's eyes locked on Marilyn's. Her voice carried across the hushed terminal. "I am the oversight authority who approved your baggage policy, and nowhere in that policy does it allow staff to strip a customer of dignity in public view." The sentence landed like a strike of thunder. Gasps rippled. Denise Palmer lowered her phone for a beat, then raised it higher. Robert Jenkins whispered, "Lord have mercy." "She wrote the rules." Marilyn stammered, "Miss Morrison, this isn't the time." Angela lifted a hand, not raised in anger, but in command. "It is precisely the time. Injustice doesn't wait for boardrooms. It begins right here, on tile floors, with people deciding whether to treat someone as a passenger or as a problem." The silence deepened. Carl's hand slipped from the scale controls. His face was pale now, sweat breaking at his temple. Angela gathered her scattered belongings herself. Each shoe, each blouse, placed back into the suitcase with unhurried dignity. The crowd watched every motion. Then she closed the zipper, stood tall, and rested her hand on the black folder. Her eyes swept the room, catching phones and faces, strangers who would carry this moment into feeds and living rooms. Her voice, low yet carrying, sealed the morning. Respect is not a privilege. It is an obligation. The pause that followed felt endless. Then, from the back of the line, a man clapped. Another joined. Within seconds, the check-in hall thundered with applause. Marilyn tried to speak, but her words drowned beneath the sound. Carl stared at the counter, unable to look up. Angela didn't wait for them to recover. She lifted her suitcase, folder tucked under her arm, and walked past the counter, as though the space had been cleared for her alone. Phones kept rolling. Voices chased after her. "Tell it, sister. That's history right there." Finally, somebody with the power to call them out. Angela didn't turn. She kept her stride steady, each step measured like punctuation. By the time she reached security, the echo of clapping still hung in the air. Hours later, the clip spread across the internet. No hashtags, just captions. People typed with shaking hands. She told them. She stood up. She changed the game. In homes, in coffee shops, in offices far from that terminal, her words repeated again and again. Respect is not a privilege. It is an obligation. And the story was only beginning. The terminal did not return to normal after Angela Morrison walked past security. The applause had faded, but something heavier remained, like the aftershock of thunder. Travelers lingered, replaying the moment on their phones, whispering to one another as though they had just witnessed a scene from history. Near the counter, Denise Palmer still held her phone high, scanning the clip she had recorded. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mama, you think they're going to fire him?" Denise's voice was sharp but hushed. "Baby, that man's already done. You don't tear apart a woman's suitcase in front of a whole crowd, unless you got something ugly working inside you." And now the world saw it. Behind the counter, Carl Benson leaned against the scale, his hands trembling. She can't really be who she says," he muttered. She was bluffing, but Marilyn Scott, the supervisor, wasn't so sure. She had caught a clearer look at the folder, at the red-stamped words. Marilyn's face had drained pale the moment she read them, because she had seen that clause referenced in internal memos only a handful of managers ever touched. Down the line, passengers compared notes. "Did you see the logo?" one man whispered. "That wasn't fake. That was corporate." Another added, "She didn't even raise her voice. Just opened that folder, and the whole room changed." Their voices had the nervous awe of people realizing they had brushed against power, disguised in plain clothes. Angela herself walked on, suitcase rolling, folder pressed under her arm. Her face gave little away, but her phone buzzed steadily in her pocket. She stopped briefly near a wall of windows, pulled it out, and answered with a single word. Proceed. The person on the other end wasn't audible to bystanders, but Angela's tone was clipped. Businesslike. Yes. At the terminal, they breached protocol. Clause 12.4 may be invoked. She paused, listening, then closed with, understood. I'll handle the front-facing side. She slipped the phone back, her expression unbroken. A few feet away, a college student named Andre Lewis whispered to his girlfriend. You hear that? She said clause 12.4. That's not normal. His girlfriend shook her head, eyes wide. Who even talks like that? She's not just a passenger. At the checkpoint, the TSA officer Rosa Martinez had caught wind too. She leaned closer as Angela presented her ID and boarding pass. The officer's eyes flicked to the name, then back to Angela's face. Recognition flashed, but Rosa said nothing. Instead, she waved Angela through with a nod more respectful than routine. Behind Angela, travelers were buzzing louder now. Some speculated she was a lawyer. Others swore she must be government. A man in a navy suit whispered, Oversight Authority. I heard that phrase once in a shareholder's report. But why would someone like that be checking a bag like the rest of us? Angela reached the escalator that carried passengers upward toward security. She placed her hand on the rail, paused as if listening again to the murmur behind her, then continued. Every step she took was filmed by strangers trying to capture the woman who had just flipped a scene of humiliation into a moment of command. In the staff office near Counter 17, Marilyn shut the door quickly behind her. She snapped at Carl, who had followed her inside. Do you understand what you just did? If she really sits on oversight, if she's the one who signed those clauses, you humiliated someone who can dismantle our department with a single phone call. Carl's voice cracked. She was just another passenger, hoodie blazer. No, Marilyn interrupted, slamming a hand on the desk. That was Angela Morrison. I've seen the name. She's been listed in policy briefings I wasn't even allowed to copy. She's connected to the boardroom. Carl collapsed into a chair, pale. So what happens to us? Marilyn didn't answer. She was staring at the office phone, as though expecting it to ring any second. Back in the concourse, whispers spread like a current. She's somebody, Robert Jenkins told his wife. Mark my words, by tonight, her name will be all over the news. Denise Palmer uploaded her video to her social page, captioning it simply, They tried to strip her dignity. She carried the receipts. Within minutes, comments poured in. Who is she? Find her name. This feels bigger than one airport. Angela reached her gate. She sat, composed, folding the folder neatly into her carry-on. Around her, passengers still stole glances, trying to place her face, trying to fit the calm authority into any box they knew. At that moment, her phone buzzed again. She answered quietly. Yes, already in motion. Prepare for escalation if necessary. She listened, nodded once, then ended the call. Her eyes flicked to the departure board, where her flight now blinked, delayed, 15 minutes. To bystanders, it looked like nothing. To those who had witnessed her earlier stand, it looked like a signal. Something was stirring. The whispers grew louder. And for the first time, people began to suspect that the woman with the calm voice and the black folder wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing in the middle of a system, and she might be about to shake it from the inside. The waiting area at Gate 32 buzzed with low chatter, the kind of restless noise that fills a room when a flight is delayed. Screens overhead flickered with updates. Passengers shifted in their seats, scrolling on phones, or standing impatiently with coffee cups. In the middle of it all sat Angela Morrison, her navy blazer unruffled, her black folder tucked neatly back into her carry-on. She appeared as still as a stone in a rushing stream. But the stillness broke when her phone lit up. The name flashing on the screen made her lips press together in a thin line. She answered, voice low yet firm. "This is Morrison." The crowd noise dulled around her, as if the air itself knew something was about to shift. A pause. Then Angela spoke again. "Yes, I'm at the terminal. The incident was documented. Multiple recordings." She listened, nodding slightly. "Understood. Initiate clause, 12.4 review." The words weren't shouted, yet those close enough to overhear stiffened. A man in a polo shirt whispered to his teenage son, "Clause 12.4 again. That's not regular talk." The boy leaned forward, eyes wide. Angela's gaze swept the room as though measuring the temperature. Her voice softened, but her words carried. "I want immediate escalation to corporate. Notify Patricia Vance directly." At that name, a young woman in a green hoodie perked up. She had interned one summer in aviation law. Her eyes widened. She whispered to her seatmate, "Patricia Vance is the CEO of the airline." The words spread quickly down the row, like a lit fuse. Angela closed the call with 3 crisp words. "I'll handle messaging." Then she slipped the phone back into her blazer pocket and leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees. Her calmness seemed almost theatrical. From across the gate, Andre Lewis, the college student from earlier, lifted his phone. His live stream was already running, and his followers were pouring into the chat. He muttered into the mic, "She just mentioned Patricia Vance by name. She's no regular passenger. Something's happening here." 2 rows away, Doctor. Helen Carter, a retired professor traveling to visit her grandchildren, whispered to her friend, "I taught policy for 30 years. That woman isn't bluffing. You don't drop a CEO's name in public unless you've earned the right." The tension deepened when the overhead announcement cut through the room. "Attention passengers of Flight 772 to Houston. Please remain seated. Boarding will be delayed." Angela looked at the screen again, then at her watch. She pulled out a sleek pen, clicked it once, and began jotting notes onto the back of a boarding slip. The words weren't visible, but the posture spoke. She was building a record, framing the story before anyone else could. Moments later, another call buzzed in. This time, she placed the phone on speaker, setting it on her lap. A crisp male voice filled the air. "Miss Morrison, headquarters has convened. The board is aware. You have full discretion." Heads snapped around. People leaned forward, pretending not to eavesdrop, but failing miserably. Angela replied, without raising her volume, "Thank you. Confirm receipt of all video evidence circulating online. I'll address preliminary actions from the gate." The voice on the phone hesitated. "Miss Morrison, the press is already calling. What message should we hold?" Angela glanced at the passengers, at the phones pointed in her direction. Then she answered, "Tell them respect is not a privilege, it's an obligation. And make sure that phrase is the headline." The words landed heavy, the same phrase she had spoken at the check-in counter. Whispers rippled again, but this time, with awe rather than doubt. The man in the polo shirt shook his head, slowly. She just dictated the headline, like she's running the whole show. Andre's live stream comments flooded. Who is she? Is she a regulator? She sounds like she's the boss of the CEO. Angela ended the call, tucked the phone away, and stood. The entire gate seemed to rise a fraction taller with her. She walked calmly to the service podium, where Janet Williams, the gate supervisor, was hunched over a keyboard. Janet looked up, startled. "Ma'am, passengers need to remain seated." Angela laid her boarding pass on the counter. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to document." Her voice wasn't loud, but every ear caught it. The room leaned closer. Janet hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Angela added, "Within the hour, you will receive direct instruction from corporate. I advise you to prepare your staff for immediate review." The words froze Janet. She stared at Angela's boarding pass, then at Angela herself, then back again. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Angela straightened, adjusted the strap of her bag, and returned to her seat. She sat as though nothing extraordinary had happened, as though she hadn't just realigned the balance of power in a crowded gate area. But the whispers told the truth. The ordinary had cracked. Passengers typed furiously into group chats. Videos uploaded faster than the Wi-Fi could handle. Somewhere across the terminal, a teenager shouted to her friend, "That lady at gate 32 just shut down the airline!" By the time the overhead screen flickered again, the entire gate was no longer waiting for a flight. They were waiting for the next move from the woman with the black folder and the phone calls that made executives flinch. And in that charged silence, every person present understood one thing. Angela Morrison was no ordinary passenger. She was something much larger. The terminal lights hummed overhead, casting their pale glow across the restless crowd at gate 32. Most passengers had given up pretending this was an ordinary delay. They were leaning forward in their seats, phones tilted, eyes fixed on the woman who sat in the center of the room like an anchor in a storm. Angela Morrison had not raised her voice once. Yet every action, every word, drew the room closer. Her phone buzzed again. She answered without hesitation, her tone as steady as a judge, delivering a verdict. "Yes, I have the documents with me. Send the preliminary compliance file directly to the gate supervisor's terminal." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her blazer pocket. Moments later, the podium computer blinked. Janet Williams, the gate supervisor, leaned in, frowning. A new window had appeared on her screen, stamped with an unmistakable header. Oversight review. Immediate action required. Janet's eyes darted from the screen to Angela, then back again. Her hand trembled as she reached for the mouse. Passengers whispered, "Did you see that?" Her call triggered the system. Someone else murmured, "She's not here to argue. She's here to activate something." Angela rose from her seat and walked calmly toward the podium. The suitcase rolled behind her, the black folder balanced in her hand. She stopped just short of the counter, her presence commanding without force. "Supervisor Williams," she said evenly, "you are now in possession of a compliance directive. I recommend you follow it." Janet swallowed hard. "Miss Morrison, I don't know how." Angela didn't blink. "You'll find step 1 outlined on the first page. Review of staff conduct." The system is already recording this interaction. The words were precise, without heat, yet they pressed Janet back like a physical weight. She glanced toward her staff, who hovered uncertainly nearby, unsure whether to stand at attention or slip quietly away. Behind them, Carl Benson appeared, pale and rigid, as if hoping to vanish into the crowd. He watched Angela with wide eyes, realizing that his earlier actions were no longer a private misstep, but a matter entered into an official record. Angela turned slightly, addressing not just Janet, but everyone within earshot. "This is not a discussion of feelings. This is a review of systems. When procedure is abused to humiliate a passenger, it ceases to be policy. It becomes misconduct." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The man in the polo shirt whispered, "She's turning this into law, right here in the gate." Angela returned her gaze to Janet. "The system will ask you for acknowledgement. Do not delay. Every minute you hesitate worsens the liability for your airline." As if on cue, Janet's computer chimed. A prompt filled the screen. "Acknowledge oversight directive? Yes. No." Her hand shook as she clicked. "Yes." The machine beeped, and a confirmation screen appeared. The tension in the room broke into a sharp intake of breath from the gathered passengers. Angela inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement more regal than victorious. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply returned to her seat, leaving silence in her wake. The passengers felt it. Something larger than a travel delay was underway. An unseen mechanism had begun to turn, gears grinding inside a machine that most of them had assumed was untouchable. And at the center of it sat Angela Morrison, calm, composed, and unyielding, making it clear to everyone watching. She had not come to argue with individuals. She had come to activate the system itself. Phones were still raised, recording every second. The passengers at gate 32 no longer scrolled for distraction. They leaned forward, as if the floor itself might shift beneath them. They had come for a flight, but now they were witnessing the unraveling of power in real time. The gate computer chimed again. Supervisor Janet Williams bent closer, her lips parting as new messages stacked across the screen. Short lines. Some from headquarters, some from systems she didn't usually have clearance to see. The words made her throat tighten. Immediate review. Pending escalation. Report to oversight authority. She looked at Angela, then back at her staff. It's really happening, she whispered. Angela remained seated, hands folded on the black folder in her lap, her face a study in composure. She wasn't performing for the cameras. She was simply present, steady, as though the turbulence belonged to everyone else. Across the gate, passengers reacted in waves. A young man in headphones blurted, "That's corporate-level access. No passenger gets that." His friend nodded, whispering, "She's more than corporate. She's writing the script." The rumors multiplied. Some whispered she was a government auditor. Others swore she must be a shareholder. An older woman insisted, "Only board members have Clause 12 authority. Only them." Meanwhile, staff who had dismissed Angela minutes earlier now shifted uneasily. Carl Benson stood near the wall, his arms wrapped tightly across his chest. Every time the computer beeped, he flinched. His earlier arrogance had drained into dread. Passengers noticed. A woman muttered loudly enough for him to hear. He thought she was nobody. Now look who's answering to her. Angela's phone buzzed once more. She answered quietly, tilting her head just enough that the nearest passengers could catch her words. "Yes. Directive acknowledged on site. Local compliance supervisor is present." She paused, listening. Understood. Begin the second phase. The effect was electric. People straightened in their seats, whispering. Second phase? Janet's screen lit again, this time with a scrolling list. New protocols streamed downward, staff conduct flagged, temporary suspension pending review, escalation report filed to executive board. Janet's mouth moved soundlessly. Suspension? Already? Angela rose slowly, the folder tucked under her arm. She stepped toward the podium again, her heels clicking against the tile like a metronome. The crowd hushed. "Supervisor Williams," she said, calm but absolute, "you are witnessing a live systems review. Every action is logged. Every delay is recorded. Transparency is non-negotiable." Janet nodded quickly, almost bowing. "Yes, ma'am." Angela turned to the room at large. "What you are seeing is not a private dispute. It is a test of accountability. When people in power assume they can humiliate quietly, the system itself must remind them they are visible." The words stirred the passengers. A ripple of agreement swept through. Some clapped softly. Others murmured affirmations. Phones captured every syllable. Carl tried to edge toward the staff door, but Angela's voice stopped him. She didn't raise her volume. "Mr. Benson, remain where you are. The system has already flagged your conduct. Your statement will be taken shortly." Gasps erupted. Carl froze, pale as paper. For the first time, he realized escape was impossible. Angela returned to her seat, unhurried, unshaken. The crowd no longer saw her as a wronged passenger. They saw her as an authority, someone whose presence had pulled hidden levers inside the airline's walls. The whispers had grown into certainty. This wasn't just an argument at a counter. This was a revelation in motion. The air at gate 32 felt heavy, as though everyone were holding their breath. Conversations shrank to whispers. Phones stayed raised, their tiny red lights blinking like warning signals. Something irreversible was about to happen. and even the most casual traveler sensed it. Angela Morrison sat centered in the storm. Black folder balanced on her lap. Her phone buzzed again, but this time she didn't answer immediately. She let it hum for a moment, her gaze steady on the departure board where Flight 772, delayed, glared in orange. Then she picked it up. "This is Morrison," she said. Her tone was calm, clipped. "Yes, I've seen the directive. Implement it. I'll deliver the public statement here." She ended the call before anyone could overhear the other side. All eyes were on her now. Even the children sensed it, their restless fidgeting stilled by the tension thickening in the room. At the podium, Janet Williams shifted nervously. Her computer kept chiming. Each new line of text more alarming than the last. Escalation to executive board confirmed. Awaiting authority statement. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat. Around her, her junior staff shuffled papers pointlessly, desperate to appear busy. Angela rose. Her chair scraped lightly against the tile, and the sound seemed to echo across the gate. The crowd hushed. She walked forward, suitcase rolling silently behind her, folder pressed under her arm. She stopped just short of the podium, turned slightly so that both the staff and the passengers could see her. Her presence drew them in as if she were standing on a stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice level but carrying. "You've witnessed the system in motion. The screens confirm what I already knew. The misconduct of this morning has triggered oversight at the highest level." Janet's hands twitched. She tried to interject. "Miss Morrison, perhaps we should move this." Angela cut her off, with a glance sharp as glass. "No, Supervisor. Privacy serves those who abuse power. Transparency serves the public." The room erupted in murmurs. A businessman whispered, "She's about to announce something." Angela opened the folder. The embossed logo gleamed again. Pages rustled as she laid one flat on the podium, tapping the red-stamped heading. Strategic Oversight Authority, Clause 12.4. This clause exists for one purpose: to ensure no passenger is stripped of dignity under the excuse of policy. Today, it was violated. Publicly. And the record of that violation has already reached corporate headquarters. Gasps scattered through the crowd. Someone clapped once before stopping, as though unsure if applause was allowed yet. Angela turned her gaze on Carl Benson, still pinned against the wall, pale and rigid. "Mr. Benson, you will soon be asked to step aside pending review. That is not my personal decision. That is the system correcting itself." Carl's mouth opened, but no words came. He lowered his eyes, ashamed. Angela closed the folder deliberately. Her next words fell into the silence, like a stone breaking water. "And beginning today," she said, "I am the one issuing the orders." The gate froze. No one moved. No one whispered. The weight of her declaration hung in the air, undeniable. Passengers looked from her to the staff, then back again. The shift was visible. Authority had moved across the floor, from the airline's podium to the woman with the black folder. Phones recorded, hearts pounded, and the quiet before the storm deepened. The impact was coming. For a long moment, silence filled Gate 32. Passengers, staff, even the restless children, all waited as if gravity itself had shifted. The only sound was the low hum of the terminal lights and the occasional chime of Janet Williams' computer. Angela Morrison stood tall at the podium, the black folder steady in her hands. She opened it again, this time sliding out a thick sheaf of documents embossed with seals and signatures. The edges gleamed under fluorescent light. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said evenly, "you've seen what happens when dignity is treated as optional. Now you deserve to see who has the authority to correct it." She laid the top page flat on the podium. The words were simple, impossible to misread. Certificate of Ownership. Strategic Oversight Authority. Shareholder of Atlantic Skies Airlines. Controlling interest. 18.7%. The gasp was collective, a wave moving through the waiting area. Phones zoomed in, capturing every letter. A teenager whispered into his live stream, "She owns part of the airline, not miles, not points, ownership." Angela's voice didn't waver. 6 months ago, I acquired nearly 1/5 of this airline. Not as an indulgence, not as vanity, as leverage. Leverage to ensure that passengers, particularly those who look like me, are treated as human beings, not as suspects. She turned another page, revealing the red-stamped clause. Clause 12.4, Material Incident Review. This clause, she continued, was written into the governance documents with my signature. It states that any incident of discriminatory treatment constitutes a material event, one that demands immediate review by the board of directors. That review began the moment Mr. Benson weighed my belongings item by item, treating me as contraband instead of a customer. Carl Benson shrank against the wall. His face was pale, his chest heaving. Murmurs rippled around him: anger, disbelief, disgust. Someone whispered, "He didn't just harass a passenger, he harassed an owner." It is accountability. Because the same arrogance that assumed I was powerless has humiliated countless passengers without cameras to catch it. Today, that ends. Janet Williams' computer chimed again. The screen displayed a live notice. Emergency board call initiated. Oversight authority in session. Janet turned the monitor slightly, and passengers gasped as they glimpsed the words. Angela continued, her voice calm but carrying weight. At this very moment, your airline's board of directors is in emergency session. They are reviewing the evidence, the live streams, the eyewitness accounts from many of you seated here. Every action will be logged. Every consequence will be public. Her words struck deeper than any shout could. This wasn't a passenger demanding fairness at a counter. This was an owner exposing rot in her own house. Angela pulled out one final page, thicker than the rest. I want you to understand what's at stake. Chen Industries holds contracts with Atlantic Skies worth over $1 million annually. Dozens of companies in my network direct their travel spending here. If this airline cannot prove that respect is its foundation, all of that spending will vanish within days. The businessman seated near the aisle muttered, "She can bring them down in a week." Angela placed the document back into the folder, closing it with deliberate care. This morning began with humiliation. It will end with reform, because I will not allow this airline to drag its passengers through indignity while I hold the power to correct it. For a breath, no one moved. Then the applause started hesitant at first, then swelling. Passengers rose to their feet, clapping with the intensity of people who knew they were part of something historic. Angela didn't bow, didn't smile. She simply returned to her seat, her folder secure, her gaze forward. The message was clear. She wasn't celebrating. She was preparing for the next move. The room pulsed with anticipation. The ownership clause had been revealed. The system was no longer hidden. Impact was no longer coming. Impact had arrived. The applause rolled like thunder across Gate 32, but Angela Morrison remained steady in her seat. She had not raised her hands in triumph or basked in the moment. Her eyes stayed fixed on the folder resting across her lap, as if she knew this was not an ending but the threshold of a larger storm. At the podium, Janet Williams stared at her computer, unable to look away. A new line had appeared across the screen. Immediate personnel action required. Compliance deadline, 24 hours. The words glowed cold and merciless. She swallowed hard, whispering under her breath, "They're moving faster than I thought." The passengers noticed too. Phones zoomed in on the monitor, capturing the message before Janet angled the screen away. Whispers ran through the crowd. "They're about to fire somebody. Not tomorrow. Now. Lord, this is history." Angela rose once more, walking slowly toward the podium. Every step made the crowd lean closer. She laid a hand lightly on the counter, her tone measured. "Supervisor Williams," she said, "you've received your directive. It will not vanish. Follow it." Janet's hands trembled. "Miss Morrison, the system is demanding staff removal on the spot." That's not procedure." Angela's eyes softened, but her voice carried iron. "Neither was humiliating a passenger in public view. The system is simply reflecting the weight of that choice." Carl Benson, still pressed against the wall, let out a broken sound. You can't just erase me like this. I was doing my job." Angela turned toward him, calm and unflinching. "Your job was to enforce weight limits, not to strip dignity. The system is correcting the difference." A murmur swept the passengers. One woman whispered to her son, "She's resetting the whole culture, right here." At that moment, Janet's radio crackled. A voice on the other end was brisk, unyielding. "This is headquarters. Confirm immediate removal of Benson from active duty. Effective now." Janet closed her eyes. The order was clear. She motioned to a nearby security officer, who stepped forward with hesitation. "Mr. Benson," the officer said quietly, "please come with me." Gasps rose as Carl, pale and trembling, was escorted through the gate. Some passengers clapped. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. The cameras captured every step. Angela did not gloat. She returned to the podium, addressing the room. This moment is not about one man. It is about a system that has for too long allowed arrogance to masquerade as policy. Today, that system has been reset. Accountability is not optional. It is mandatory. The applause surged again. Louder this time. Not for punishment, but for clarity. People clapped as though they were clapping for themselves, for every traveler who had ever been told to move aside, to accept humiliation quietly. Angela closed the folder and tucked it under her arm. "This is only the first step," she added. "The system will continue its review, and every change it demands will be met." The gate pulsed with energy. Strangers exchanged nods, recording with shaking hands, knowing they were part of a story that would outlive the flight delay. Angela stepped back to her seat, composed as ever, her eyes forward. Behind her, the airline's old habits were crumbling. Ahead of her, reform had already begun. The reset was complete. Within hours, the ripples from Gate 32 surged into boardrooms thousands of miles away. What had begun as a single suitcase on a scale was now a crisis commanding the full weight of Atlantic Skies Airlines. By mid-afternoon, an emergency meeting was convened in a glass-walled conference room at corporate headquarters. Screens lined the walls, each one alive with live feeds, reports, and clips from passengers that had already gone viral. At the head of the table sat Patricia Vance, the airline's CEO, her jaw set tight, her fingers drumming the polished wood. On one screen, the video played again, Carl Benson weighing Angela Morrison's blouse as though it were contraband. Patricia closed her eyes briefly. "Unacceptable," she muttered. "Beyond unacceptable." Angela appeared on another screen, live from a quiet room in the terminal. Her tone was as calm as ever. "You've all seen the footage. The clause was triggered. Now you must act." A board member, David Liu, cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Morrison, we hadn't anticipated enforcement in such a public setting." Angela's gaze cut through the video feed. "Discrimination is always public for the one enduring it. Your discomfort is not the crisis. The crisis is systemic. Fix it." The room stiffened. Patricia lifted her hand. "She's right. We've been reactive, not preventative. That ends now." She turned to her chief of operations. "Draft an immediate suspension policy. Any staff accused of discriminatory conduct will be removed pending review effective today." Another executive tried to object. "That could trigger union disputes." Patricia silenced him with a glare. "Better a dispute than a collapse. Our stock is already sliding. We cannot afford inaction." Angela's voice carried from the screen again. This reform is not symbolic. Passengers must feel the difference the moment they step to a counter. Training, accountability, and visible protections. Otherwise, today repeats tomorrow. The executives scribbled notes. Their usual corporate detachment stripped away. They were not strategizing for quarterly profits anymore. They were fighting for survival. Patricia leaned forward, her voice measured. "Miss Morrison, you've forced our hand, and rightly so. Draft the directives. You'll oversee implementation. If this company is to recover, it will recover on your terms." Angela inclined her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Then, let us begin. Respect is not a privilege. It is an obligation. And from this day forward, it will be policy." The meeting ended in tense silence. But outside those walls, a shift had already begun. Employees across airports were receiving new directives on their tablets. Supervisors were calling huddles. Words like reform, oversight, and compliance were suddenly alive in their ears. The reform was no longer a proposal. It was emergency law, and it was already in motion. News travels fast in airports, but this was faster than a boarding call. By the next morning, the clip from Gate 32 had been viewed more than 10 million times. Commentators on morning shows dissected Angela Morrison's calm defiance. One anchor leaned forward, her tone almost reverent. She didn't shout. She didn't break down. She changed the rules with a folder and a sentence. In Atlanta, a group of travelers gathered at a different airline's check-in desk. When a staff member spoke curtly to an elderly black woman, 3 passengers stepped in. "We all saw what happened yesterday," one said firmly. "Don't make that mistake again." The staff member faltered, then softened his tone. The woman checked in without another problem. By afternoon, headlines rolled across news sites. The oversight clause shakes an airline. Editorials praised Angela's intervention as a turning point. On social feeds, her words were quoted again and again. "Respect is not a privilege, it is an obligation." Inside Atlantic skies, reform spread like fire. Supervisors received surprise audits. New training sessions were scheduled, mandatory across all hubs. Staff who once rolled their eyes now whispered nervously about Clause 12.4. The language of policy had entered the language of survival. Other airlines noticed. Delta Wind Airways announced it was reviewing its passenger conduct protocols. A union spokesperson admitted, "We'd rather adjust voluntarily than be forced by the next Angela Morrison." For passengers, the effect was immediate. Some filmed themselves checking in at counters, narrating, "Day 1 after the reset. Staffer smiling. Policies posted clearly. Let's see if it lasts." Thousands of viewers replied with their own stories, from baggage fees waived unfairly to boarding denied without cause. The stories no longer floated in silence, they gathered momentum. Church basements, community centers, and barber shops buzzed with talk. Older women, especially, replayed Angela's video, nodding with quiet pride. "She carried herself like she was raised for that moment," one grandmother said, her voice thick with emotion. Angela herself remained silent in public. She issued no press statements, no interviews, but her presence was everywhere. Training slides carried her name. Boardrooms invoked her clause. Passengers invoked her sentence. And beyond the airline industry, activists saw a model: calm exposure of systemic abuse, followed by structural reform. Editorials in national papers argued, what Morrison demonstrated at Gate 32 was not just courage, it was a blueprint. The ripple had become a wave, and everyone knew waves don't stop at one shore. A week later, the hum of the corporate training hall was different. Rows of uniformed staff sat stiffly in their seats, screens glowing in front of them. On every screen, the same video began to play. Angela Morrison at Gate 32. Suitcase laid bare. Folder revealed. Voice steady as stone. They watched Carl Benson weigh her belongings. Watched the crowd gasp. Watched Angela declare, Respect is not a privilege. It is an obligation. The words carried through the speakers with the same gravity they had held in the terminal. The staff shifted uncomfortably, some with guilt, some with awe. At the front of the hall, Patricia Vance, the CEO, addressed them. You've seen the footage. You've seen what happens when arrogance replaces professionalism. This company's future depends on making sure no passenger ever again feels what Miss Morrison endured. Today, this is not just a slogan. It is a binding policy. Across the country, other companies echoed the change. 2 competing airlines announced similar oversight clauses. A transit authority quietly added a line to its employee handbook. Respect is mandatory conduct. Angela's moment had become institutional, far larger than the humiliation that sparked it. In the living rooms, elders replayed her words. On radio shows, callers repeated the phrase, like scripture. That woman spoke for all of us who had to swallow it down, one caller said. Another added, she didn't scream, she didn't bow. She simply stood. Angela, true to form, stayed mostly silent. She did not make the late-night talk show circuit. She declined magazine profiles. When asked by a reporter outside her office what she wanted people to remember, she replied simply, "The system works when we demand it to." Then she walked on, briefcase in hand, but her silence was not absence. Her presence lived in the new policies, in the whispers of staff who now paused before dismissing a passenger, in the applause that sometimes broke out when travelers invoked her name at counters. At the next board meeting, Patricia held up the black folder now enshrined in the company's records. This, she told the executives, is more than a clause. It's a compass. And from this point forward, we will follow it. Angela's legacy was not just written in the bylaws of an airline. It was stitched into the fabric of accountability across industries. She had turned humiliation into reform, exposure into blueprint, a suitcase on a scale into a standard for justice. And in the echo of her words steady, unwavering, the legacy was secure. Respect is not a privilege. It is an obligation. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I know it wasn't always easy to listen to, because what happened to Angela Morrison could have happened to any one of us, or to someone we love. But that's exactly why her story matters. It's not just about an airline, or a suitcase, or a single embarrassing moment. It's about the power of dignity, the strength of calm conviction, and the reminder that silence in the face of injustice is never the answer. What Angela showed us is that true change doesn't come from shouting louder than everyone else. It comes from standing steady, prepared, and unshakable, even when the world tries to push you down. Her story proves that the rules can be rewritten, and respect can be demanded, not begged for. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What part of Angela's story struck you the most? How would you have responded in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. More powerful stories are coming, and I want you right here with us.